The evening was quiet, and the streets had almost emptied as people rushed back to their warm homes. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows on the narrow road. A woman walked slowly, her tired steps showing the weight of a long day. She carried a small bag of groceries, the cheapest item she could afford, enough to stretch through the week. Her clothes were simple, slightly worn, but her eyes carried a softness that could calm even the most restless soul. Though she did not have much in life, she always tried to carry kindness in her heart. As she turned the corner, she noticed something unusual. A little girl was standing near a lamppost, looking left and right with confusion. She was holding a small toy close to her chest, and her tiny hands shook in the cool breeze. The woman paused for a moment, watching carefully. The girl looked too young to be out on the streets alone. Her face was pale with fear, and her eyes were full of tears that had not yet fallen. The woman's heart tightened. She knew that feeling of being lost, even if not in the streets, but in life. Without hesitation, she walked toward the child. The woman bent slightly and spoke in a soft voice. "Are you all right, sweetheart? Are you looking for someone?" The girl hesitated, clutching her toy tighter. She did not answer, only shook her head slowly. The woman gave a gentle smile, trying not to scare her. "It's okay, you don't have to be afraid. I won't harm you. Are you lost?" The girl's lips trembled, and finally she whispered, "I can't find my daddy." Hearing those words, the woman felt a wave of concern. She looked around, hoping to see a parent nearby, but the street was empty. The shops were closing, shutters rolling down, and no one seemed to notice the little girl except her. "Don't worry," the woman said softly, reaching out her hand. "I will help you. You don't have to be alone." The girl stared at her hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out her own small fingers. The woman carefully wrapped her hand around the girl's, feeling how cold it was. They walked together toward a small bench nearby. The woman took out a piece of bread from her grocery bag and offered it to the child. "Here, eat this. You must be hungry." The girl hesitated, but then took a small bite. The relief on her face made the woman's heart melt. She thought of how little she had, yet sharing it felt more important than keeping it for herself. The girl chewed quietly, her eyes never leaving the woman's face, as if trying to measure if she could be trusted. The woman began asking gentle questions, not pushing too hard. "What's your name? Where did you last see your daddy?" But the girl only gave short answers, sometimes just nodding or shaking her head. She seemed too frightened to say much. The woman realized it was best not to press. What mattered now was making the child feel safe. She patted her shoulder lightly and said, "Don't worry. You can stay with me tonight, and tomorrow we will try to find your family." The girl's eyes widened, and she asked in a trembling voice, "You won't leave me alone, right?" That simple question broke the woman's heart. She shook her head and smiled warmly. "No, I won't leave you. I promise." The girl leaned closer, resting her head lightly against the woman's arm. For the first time she seemed calmer. As they sat under the streetlight, the woman thought about her own life. She lived in a small, broken-down room where the roof leaked whenever it rained. She struggled every day to make ends meet, working odd jobs that barely paid enough. Yet, in that moment, none of those struggles mattered. All that mattered was the little soul sitting beside her who needed comfort and safety. The world outside might not notice, but to the woman, this lost child was now her responsibility. After a while, the woman stood up and held the girl's hand again. "Come, let's go to my home. You will be safe there." The girl nodded quietly, walking with her without resistance. The woman could feel the girl's small steps trying to match her own. She noticed how tightly the child held her hand, as if afraid to let go even for a second. It reminded her of how people cling to hope when everything else feels uncertain. The walk to her home was not long, but to the woman, it felt heavy with questions. Who was this child? Where had she come from? Why was she alone? Yet she chose not to think too deeply at that moment. Her first duty was to make sure the girl felt cared for. Everything else could wait. As they neared her modest home, she whispered softly, "You'll be safe here. Don't worry anymore." The little girl looked up at her with eyes that were still full of fear, but now carried a small spark of trust. In that spark, the woman saw something powerful, a silent bond formed through kindness, the kind that did not ask for anything in return. Neither of them knew then how this simple act would change their lives forever, but the first step had been taken under the light of a lonely street lamp, where one woman's compassion met a child's desperate need for comfort. Asterisk. The night grew colder as the woman unlocked the door to her small room. It was nothing fancy, just 4 cracked walls with peeling paint, a rickety old bed, and a table that leaned slightly to one side. Yet to her, it was home, and now it had to be a shelter for the frightened little girl standing beside her. She switched on the light, and the dim yellow bulb flickered weakly before staying on. The girl looked around carefully, her big eyes scanning the simple space, as if trying to understand where she had landed. The woman set down her grocery bag and pulled out the remaining bread, a tiny packet of milk, and an apple. It was not much, but she placed it on the table as though it were a feast. "Here, sweetheart," she said softly. "Have something to eat. You need your strength." The girl sat down quietly, still holding her toy in one hand while nibbling on the bread with the other. Her face relaxed with each bite, and the woman could tell just how hungry she had been. The woman poured milk into a small cup and handed it over. "Drink this slowly. It will make you feel better." The girl took it, sipping carefully, her lips leaving a faint mark on the rim. She looked up at the woman, her eyes filled with gratitude, though she said nothing. That silent look touched the woman more than words ever could. Wanting to ease her fear, the woman tried to speak in a light tone. "This toy you're holding, it must be very special to you." The girl nodded, hugging it tighter. "It was from Daddy. He gave it to me before he went to work," she whispered, her voice trembling. The woman smiled gently. "Then we must take care of it until we find him, right?" The girl gave a small nod again. After the meal, the woman spread a thin blanket on the bed and fluffed up the old pillow as best as she could. She patted the spot, inviting the girl to lie down. "You can rest here. I'll sit right beside you so you don't feel alone." The girl hesitated at first, then climbed onto the bed, curling up with her toy. The woman sat near her, humming a tune she remembered from her own childhood. Slowly the girl's breathing softened, her eyelids grew heavy, and soon she drifted into sleep. The woman watched her closely, brushing the strand of hair away from her small face. There was innocence there, mixed with fear, and it made the woman wonder how long the girl had been wandering the streets before she found her. She thought about how dangerous the world could be, especially for someone so young. A quiet prayer escaped her lips, asking for the girl's safety until her family was found. Through the night, the woman barely slept. She checked again and again to make sure the girl was still sleeping peacefully. Every little sound outside made her heart race. What if someone was looking for the child? What if trouble arrived at her door? But then she reminded herself that keeping the girl safe was worth any risk. Kindness had brought them together, and she wasn't going to let fear push it away. When morning came, the first rays of sunlight slipped through the small window, touching the girl's face. She stirred and sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. For a moment, confusion crossed her expression, but then she saw the woman sitting nearby, smiling softly. Relief washed over her features. She whispered, "You didn't leave me." The woman reached out and patted her head. "I told you, I won't leave you. You're safe here." The woman then prepared a simple breakfast, just leftover bread and water, but served it as if it were something special. The girl ate quietly, but she seemed more at ease than the night before. After finishing, she finally spoke a little more. "My daddy. He works in a big office. He promised he'd come for me. Her voice cracked, but her eyes held a spark of hope. The woman nodded with warmth. And we'll help him find you. Until then, you are not alone. Later that day, the woman held the girl's hand and stepped outside. The street was busy now, filled with people rushing to work and children running with school bags. Some neighbors glanced curiously at the sight of the woman with a child who clearly wasn't hers. Whispers floated around, but the woman ignored them. She kept her focus on the girl, making sure she felt safe. She decided to buy a small treat for the child, something to make her smile. With the few coins she had left, she bought a small sweet bun from a roadside stall. She handed it over with a smile, and the girl's face lit up as she took a bite. For the first time, she laughed softly, and the sound felt like music. The woman's heart warmed, realizing how precious even small moments of joy could be. As the day stretched on, the girl clung closer to the woman, her trust growing with every step. Though the woman still didn't know who the girl really was or how she had ended up lost, she felt something change inside her. She was no longer just a poor woman struggling with her own burdens. She was now a guardian, a protector of a little soul who needed her. Neither of them knew what awaited them in the coming days. For now there was only kindness, trust, and the quiet bond forming between them, a bond that would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. The morning sun had fully risen, painting the streets with a golden glow, but the woman felt a strange heaviness in the air. She walked with the little girl's hand in hers, trying to appear calm even though her mind was restless. She could not stop thinking about the girl's words from the night before. "My daddy works in a big office." Something about that simple statement kept echoing in her thoughts. She didn't want to make the child feel pressured, but deep inside, she knew the girl's family must be searching desperately. The woman lived in a quiet part of town, where news didn't always reach quickly. She didn't own a television, and the old radio she had stopped working months ago. Still, she noticed something unusual that morning. Neighbors were gathered in small groups, whispering, showing one another the headlines from newspapers. Their voices carried bits and pieces of the same story: a missing child. The woman didn't catch the full details until she walked past a small corner shop. There, on the front page of a newspaper hanging outside, was a large photo of the very girl holding her hand. The headline read, "CEO's daughter missing, citywide search underway." Her heart stopped. She froze in her tracks, staring at the picture. The girl noticed it too, her grip on the woman's hand tightening as if she already understood. The woman quickly pulled her close and turned away, not wanting strangers to notice the resemblance. She felt her breath quicken. She had no idea the little girl she helped was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the city. Fear and confusion washed over her. What if people thought she had kidnapped the girl? What if the police didn't believe her? She looked down at the child, who clung to her, trusting completely. That trust gave her courage. She whispered gently, "Don't be scared. I'm here with you." The girl nodded, though her small eyes showed worry. Throughout the day, the city seemed louder and busier than usual. Posters with the girl's photo appeared on poles and walls. Police cars passed by, their sirens echoing. The woman tried to avoid crowded areas, holding the girl close to her side. She couldn't risk losing her in the chaos. Still, she felt a heavy responsibility. She needed to find a safe way to bring the girl back to her family. Back at her small home, she sat the girl down and tried once again to ask questions gently. "Do you remember the way to your house? Maybe a street name? Or a building?" The girl shook her head sadly. "I only remember Daddy's office. It's very big. I got lost when I tried to go there." Her voice cracked, and tears filled her eyes. The woman hugged her tightly, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. We'll figure it out together." The woman thought about going straight to the police, but a wave of doubt filled her. She had seen how people sometimes judge the poor unfairly. With her worn clothes and simple home, would they really believe she had only been helping? What if they accused her of taking the child for money? The thought made her stomach twist with fear. As evening fell, she decided to take the girl for a walk to clear their minds. They stayed close to the quieter streets, away from crowds. The little girl held her hand more firmly than before, as if sensing the world outside was filled with strangers who might separate them. The woman noticed how every time they passed a poster with the girl's face, the child looked away quickly, pressing closer to her side. While walking, they stopped at a small food stall. The woman used the last of her coins to buy a simple bowl of rice and vegetables. She placed it in front of the girl, watching her eat eagerly. The sight warmed her heart again. Even with everything happening around them, she felt thankful she could at least fill the child's stomach. As the sky darkened, she realized how deeply the girl had become a part of her life in such a short time. Strangers might see her as a poor woman with nothing to offer, but to this child, she had become a safe place, a motherly figure when the world felt frightening. That thought gave her strength, but she knew time was running out. The search was growing larger, and sooner or later, someone would recognize the girl. The whispers in the streets, the curious looks from neighbors, it was only a matter of time before suspicion fell on her. That night, as the girl lay asleep once again in her small bed, the woman sat by the window, staring out into the dark streets. She could hear the distant hum of cars and the faint voices of people still talking about the missing girl. She folded her hands together, torn between fear and hope. She wanted to protect the child for as long as she could, but she also knew the truth would come crashing into their lives soon. And when it did, everything would change, not just for the little girl, but for her as well. She had no idea that the next day would bring the moment when her quiet act of kindness would be revealed to the world, and her life would never be the same again. The next morning started like any other, but the woman felt uneasy as soon as she stepped outside with the little girl. The streets seemed different, filled with watchful eyes and whispers. Posters with the child's picture were everywhere now, on walls, poles, and shop windows. The words, "Missing daughter of CEO," glared back at her with every step. She tried to keep her head low, hoping no one would notice the resemblance between the girl walking beside her and the photo on the paper. But destiny, she knew, could not be avoided forever. The girl clung tightly to her hand, her small fingers almost trembling. "Will my daddy find me?" she whispered, her voice carrying both hope and fear. The woman gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Yes, sweetheart. He will. But until then, I'll stay with you." The girl looked up with eyes full of trust, and the woman's heart tightened. That trust gave her strength, even as her mind raced with worry. They walked toward a small grocery shop to buy something cheap for breakfast. As the woman placed a loaf of bread on the counter, the shopkeeper's eyes lingered too long on the child. He frowned, his gaze shifting from the girl to the poster taped to his window. His mouth opened slightly as though to speak, but then he closed it, staring suspiciously. The woman felt her heart pound. She quickly paid and hurried out of the store, pulling the girl close. But the damage had been done. A man who had been standing nearby made a call on his phone, his eyes following them as they walked away. The woman didn't notice at first, but within minutes, the sound of sirens echoed from down the road. People began to gather, pointing toward her. Panic surged in her chest. She turned to see police cars pulling up fast, their lights flashing. The girl gasped and clutched her hand tighter. "Don't let them take me away," she cried. The woman knelt quickly, cupping the child's face. "It's all right, don't be afraid. I'm here." But before she could say more, officers surrounded them. "Ma'am, step away from the child," one officer commanded firmly. The woman's eyes widened in shock. "No, please, you don't understand. I didn't hurt her, I was helping her." Her voice trembled with desperation, but her words seemed powerless against the wall of suspicion. The little girl began to cry, clinging to the woman's arm. "No, she helped me. She's not bad." The crowd gasped, whispers spreading quickly. Some people frowned, others looked uncertain. But the police moved forward, carefully taking hold of the child and guiding her away. The girl screamed, trying to break free, reaching out for the woman. "Don't leave me, please." The woman's heart shattered. She stretched her arm helplessly as the girl was pulled back. "Listen to her. I found her lost. I never wanted anything but to keep her safe." Tears rolled down her face, but the officers remained cautious. To them, she was just a poor woman holding a missing child. At the station, everything unfolded quickly. The woman was questioned again and again, her words often met with doubtful stares. She explained how she had found the girl on the street, alone and afraid, and how she had taken her home only to protect her. Each time she spoke, her voice carried nothing but truth and emotion. But still, the weight of suspicion hung over her. Then, in the midst of it all, the doors burst open. A tall, well-dressed man rushed in, his face pale with fear and exhaustion. It was the CEO. His eyes immediately fell on the small figure of his daughter sitting in the corner with an officer. "My baby!" he cried, rushing forward and scooping her into his arms. Tears streamed down his face as he hugged her tightly. The girl clung to him, but then she turned quickly, pointing to the woman who sat in the corner with her head bowed. "Daddy, don't be mad at her. She saved me. She gave me food and a bed. She kept me safe when I was scared." The room fell silent. The CEO slowly looked toward the woman, his expression shifting from suspicion to something softer, more conflicted. For a moment, he just studied her, the worn clothes, the tired face, the humble figure who sat trembling as though awaiting punishment. He realized then that the girl's words were true. The woman met his eyes and spoke quietly, her voice raw with emotion. "I only did what anyone should. She was alone, and I couldn't leave her like that." The CEO's lips trembled, his arms tightening around his daughter. He had imagined the worst, feared the darkest. But here was the truth before him. His daughter had been saved not by wealth or power, but by the compassion of someone who had almost nothing. The officers shifted uncomfortably, their stern expression softening. The weight of misunderstanding began to lift, though the woman still sat frozen, unsure what her fate would be. She had not done it for reward, and she had not expected recognition. All she had wanted was to keep a little girl safe. In that moment, the CEO realized the depth of what had happened. His daughter had been cared for by a stranger who owed him nothing. And it was a stranger whose kindness had done what all his wealth and connections could not protect his child when she was most vulnerable. The truth had finally come to light, but what it meant for the woman's life was something neither of them could yet imagine. The air in the police station felt heavy, but the storm of suspicion had begun to settle. The CEO held his daughter close, his suit wrinkled and his face damp with tears. He whispered softly into her ear, kissing her hair as if to reassure himself she was real and safe. The little girl, however, kept turning toward the woman sitting quietly in the corner. Her small hands tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she said in a shaky voice, "don't let them be mean to her. She helped me. She's my friend." The CEO followed her gaze again. His eyes softened, but pride and confusion still tugged at him. For hours he had been living in fear, imagining kidnappers and threats. Now staring at this poor woman with worn clothes and tired eyes, he felt his heart shift. She had not asked for anything. She had not harmed his daughter. She had simply opened her home and her heart when no one else would. The officers looked at the CEO for direction, waiting to see how he would respond. One of them cleared his throat and said, "Sir, she claims she found your daughter and cared for her." "Your daughter confirms it." The CEO tightened his grip on his child, then slowly walked toward the woman. She lowered her eyes, unsure if he would believe her or accuse her again. He stopped in front of her, his voice low but steady. You took my daughter into your home? You fed her, kept her safe, even though you had so little yourself. The woman raised her head just enough to meet his eyes. She was alone, frightened. How could I turn away? I did only what was right. Her words were plain, but the sincerity in them made his chest ache. The girl wiggled free from her father's arms and ran back to the woman, wrapping her arms around her tightly. I don't want to leave you, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. The woman hugged her back gently, stroking her hair, though her own eyes were misty. You're safe now, little one. That's all that matters. The room grew silent, every officer and bystander watching the scene unfold. The CEO's hands trembled as he realized how close he had come to losing the most precious thing in his life. He owed this woman more than words could say. Slowly, his voice broke the silence. You didn't just protect my daughter. You gave her comfort when I couldn't. For that, I can never thank you enough. The woman shook her head quickly. I don't need thanks. I didn't do it for reward. I did it because she needed someone. But the CEO's eyes hardened with determination. No, kindness like yours deserves more than just words. You may think you are poor, but today you have shown wealth far greater than money, kindness, courage, and love. Let me help you, just as you helped my child. The officers began to disperse, realizing the matter was no longer about suspicion, but gratitude. The CEO made arrangements immediately, ensuring the woman was not left to walk back to her broken home alone. He offered her a ride in his car, though at first she resisted. But the girl clung to her hand, refusing to let go, and so she agreed. When they arrived at the CEO's grand house later that day, the woman was overwhelmed by its size and beauty. Marble floors, glittering chandeliers, rooms bigger than her entire home, it felt like another world. Yet, the little girl never left her side, holding her hand as if afraid their bond might vanish in the grand surroundings. The CEO noticed and smiled softly. He realized the depth of the connection his daughter had made with this stranger, and it moved him deeply. In the days that followed, the CEO did more than just express gratitude. He offered her a stable job, a home where she no longer had to worry about leaky roofs or empty shelves, and the chance to rebuild her life with dignity. At first she was hesitant. She had never asked for anything, and accepting such generosity felt strange. But the CEO reminded her, just as you didn't turn away from my daughter, I cannot turn away from you. You gave me back my family. Let me give you back hope. The woman's life slowly transformed. From struggling with hunger and loneliness, she found herself surrounded by new opportunities. But even as her circumstances changed, her heart remained the same, humble, kind, and gentle. The little girl visited her often, and the bond they shared never faded. It was a bond built not on wealth or status, but on compassion at a moment when it was needed most. And so, the story of a poor woman who once walked home alone after a long day turned into something far greater. With one simple act of kindness, offering her hand to a lost girl, she had changed not only the child's life but her own. She had reminded everyone that true wealth is not measured in money or power, but in the courage to care for another when no one else will. The world outside moved on, but for the woman and the girl, life would never be the same again. Their paths had crossed by chance, but the connection they formed was no accident. It was proof that kindness, no matter how small, can light up even the darkest night and change destinies in ways no one could ever imagine.